Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tony. Happy birthday to you.
Hey, are we doing Boys in the Band again? What?
It's your birthday.
It is. It is.
So which birthday is it?
Excuse me?
Tony, which birthday is it?
Oh, it's mine. It's mine. April 30th.
I know, Tony. April 30th. April 30th what?
April 30th, period. That's okay. I had it props. That's a Lucy joke. That's from I Love Lucy. Someone asked Lucy's birthday and she says August 6th, period. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. Well, thank you. Yes, indeed. This is a very special podcast because it is my birthday. And since it's my birthday, I get to pick. Which is silly because I pick all the time.
Sometimes I get to fight my own way in.
Sometimes you get one. But this is very special because, dear listener, it's our first silent film. Wow, how about that? And depending on how this goes, it may be our last silent film. But I don't think so. I got to tell you, Brad, I think I was pretty easy on you with this. It wasn't like I gave you Intolerance or Birth of a Nation. This is My Best Girl.
Well, I have a thing or two to say about this when we get moving.
Yeah, I guess you do.
I
So,
do.
Well, my feelings about this and why I wanted this to be my birthday pick, as I said, it's probably my favorite film of this entire era. I think it's charming, it's touching, it's beautiful to watch. And if you don't think so, Brad, then I think we're going to do our first silent podcast because I cannot brook. No, that's not true. I can brook criticisms of this film, but I do adore it. I do love it. In my opinion, it's not only Mary Pickford's best romantic comedy, it's one of the best romantic comedies of the silent era. And it's also, sadly, Mary Pickford's last silent film.
But she did continue.
She did.
Not all silent stars did.
No, she did. Well, she went on to make films after this, but this is really her last good film. And I'll talk a little bit about Mary Pickford's subsequent films after Sound came in. You know, she was only 35, and she looks a lot younger than 35, I think. Did you think so?
Yeah, I thought she would have been younger the way you said that.
Yeah, really, considering the woman played children frequently, But so she's only 35, but she had been acting since she was 7. And she'd been acting in films since 1909. So she was a veteran of over 200 films by the time she retired.
I know, I saw that. And if you want any idea how many films they made back in the silent era, that is a lot of films.
And we're not talking about, when she started in 1909, they were shorts.
They were shorts, but most were back then.
Feature films, but they made a film a week. Sometimes they made a film a day. It was that fast. But so since we're talking about this, I got to ask you, Brad, is this the first silent film you've ever watched?
It is not the first silent film I watched. And let me tell you about this. I don't watch silent films and I don't watch foreign films with
Subtitles?
Subtitles. And there's a reason for that. Oh. Most silent films, the words pop up so fast and they go away before you can read them. It's irritating as hell. I don't watch I don't watch foreign films, not because I don't think they're great films. There's so much in expressions when it comes to an actor. And I feel like when I'm reading, I'm not going to say I never watch them, but when I'm reading, I miss so much of that. And it's almost like I'd have to watch it twice.
That's a very astute observation. I know other people who feel exactly the same way about that. Yeah.
And that's the only reason I don't mind reading. But here's what I think of this film.
Okay.
I was very nervous when you said, let's do a silent film. I loved this film.
Oh, yay. Happy birthday, Tony.
It is a wonderful sitcom before the word sitcom ever was a thing.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true.
It is delightful. The story was great. The direction is great. The cast is great. One I wasn't thrilled with, but the rest of them were just great. And the thing is, one of the things, first of all, the cards were up very long time that you could easily read them. They were short because so much was said without any words.
Well, hello. I think you just hit the nail on the head there with the silent film,
But not all silent films were this way. A lot of them had like the words popping up all the time.
Well,
and it was so unnecessary with this movie.
They didn't need words. They had faces then, as Norma Desmond famously says in Sunset Boulevard. And I think this is a good point to bring up and a good time to talk up. I don't want to go into too much of the history of silent film, but I do want to put a few legends, rumors to rest. And one of them is the one that you just said that we're going to talk about. But I think the first thing I have to say, and the first thing that's most important to people when they watch a silent film, is to realize that silent films were never silent. That is a misnomer, and people think, I can't watch this movie. It doesn't matter where you were. There was always some sort of musical accompaniment, and that whether you be in, I always hate to pick on Peoria. I don't know why Peoria always pops in my head, but you could have been, let's not say, I'm Pocatello, Idaho. There you go. So you can be watching a film in Pocatello, Idaho, and there would be a piano or a three-piece orchestra or an organ. Or you could be watching this in one of these fabulous movie palaces in Times Square, and there could be a full orchestra or a philharmonic. So that's what's so important to point out. Most people experience silent films with orchestrations, because by this time, 1927, there was recording. You could record a soundtrack, and that's really how silent film talkies started. It was not speech; it was music. So I think that's really important to point out when people talk about silent film, and also what you said about the title cards. The title cards were not in place of dialogue usually. Sometimes they were. But the point of the silent film was that the actors, the faces, told you the story. You used your eyes to watch the story being told. So the title cards usually just punctuated a point, or they acted as to get you from one scene to the next. They acted as a transition, but they didn't replace dialogue. That was the point. Was that the actors told you the story through their eyes, through their gestures. And nobody did that better than Mary Pickford.
I am really still bowled away from this film. It's just, I laughed a lot. I can't say enough, and I'm really surprised.
Oh, good. Wow, that's good. Well, I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised because I was a little nervous about it. I like when we have healthy debates about films, but there are some films which I probably shouldn't give them to us to talk about because they mean so much to me. And this is one of these films that just has a very, very special place in my heart. And so I'm glad we're talking about it. And I would love to talk about Mary, and I don't want to go too deeply in depth about Mary because Mary Pickford, there are some great books, websites. There's one fantastic documentary in particular that features one of the co-hosts of this podcast. And it is available on Amazon, and we'll link below. It's called Mary Pickford, A Blessing or a Curse. But I think what I want to say about Mary Pickford is that you can't really be hyperbolic when you're talking about Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford was the biggest star the world has ever known. I just want to say that from the beginning. And that is not a hyperbolic statement, Brad. That is fact. She was known everywhere, from Pomona to St. Petersburg to Peoria.
When I looked at her salary during that time period, I was amazed.
Oh, yeah.
She was making $350,000 per movie, which today equates to $6.3 million.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I got some stats for you, believe me.
Well, it kind of confused me a little bit because this movie, it means that she almost was the entire cost of this movie, which maybe she was, but...
But what year was that? This is, by the time it came to My Best Girl, which is 1927, Mary Pickford owned the whole shebang. Okay, this was Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford was the producer. Mary Pickford was the studio executive. Mary Pickford, this was part of Mary Pickford's Pickford Film Corporation. So she owned this entire thing. Back in 1917, she was the first actress to get points You know what points are when an actor gets points on a film?
No.
It's a percentage. They get a percentage of the profits. Okay. Usually actors today get 2, 3, 4%. Mary Pickford got 50%.
Oh my Lord.
Back in 1917. So that's just for context. But we'll go into that because I do have some things I want to talk about it. But the reason I think that it's hard, you have to understand that Mary Pickford was the biggest thing in the world was because silent films were a universal language. You know, and this is one of the things that people were crying out when talkies came in. They're like, we've lost our universal language, because all you had to do was change the language of a title card and a film could play anywhere.
Oh, that's true.
So that's why people knew when Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks went to Russia, they were mobbed. I mean, it's insane how famous this woman was. And today we think someone is a celebrity if they have 1 million followers on Instagram. Don't you think that's fair?
Maybe more nowadays.
Well, 2 million then. Okay. 2 million, 10 million followers. I think you think would be a celebrity today. If you had 10 million followers on Instagram, I think you're a celebrity. Mary Pickford would have had 100 million followers on Instagram. I mean, that is how famous she was. In 1915, it was determined that her face was seen by 12.5 million people every 24 hours.
Wow.
So that's pretty famous.
A little bit on the famous side.
So I'm just going to go a little bit into Mary's background, just so we have a context for this. Mary Pickford famously called America's sweetheart, even though she was born in Canada.
I thought Sandra Bullock was America's sweetheart.
There's always an America's sweetheart, but Mary was the first.
Okay.
Mary Pickford was the first America's sweetheart. And she didn't take that name. The distributors gave her that name. Mary did not take that on. And she always pointed that out. So she was born in Toronto, Canada in 1892 as Gladys Louise Smith. She was the oldest of 3 children, and her father deserted the family, and then he later died. And so there were 3 children and her mother, and they were in very dire straits. And her mother, Mary's mother, Charlotte Pickford, who was quite a force to be reckoned with, very close to Mary, began taking in boarders to help them make ends meet. And one of them was a theatrical stage manager for a stock company in Toronto. Now, they had trouble making money. They were taking in boarders. So he said, there's the play that we're doing needs a child in the cast. Would you think about allowing Gladys, that was her name at the time, to be in the play? And Mary's mother was horrified because acting was only slightly better than prostitution at the time. But the money was very badly needed. And so she allowed it. And Mary's little sister Lottie also did the play. And that began it. From then on, little Gladys was the breadwinner of the family. And the entire family began touring in theatrical productions. And it's interesting because when they were touring, little Gladys met 2 other young theatrical troopers, sisters named Dorothy and Lillian Gish, who kind of played a small part in the history of film as well.
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, possibly. So anyway, fast forward, many years pass. Gladys is now a teenager, and she's in a Broadway play. And if you want to find out the machinations that she did to get in the play, then you can watch the documentary. She's in a Broadway play called The Warrens of Virginia, which also featured another future colleague, Cecil B. DeMille, by the way. And it was under the tutelage of David Belasco, who was a big theatrical impresario. And he is the one who said, Gladys Smith is not going to fly. We need to change your name. And he's the one who christened her Mary Pickford. Pickford was a family name, and Mary liked the name Marie, but he thought that was too fancy. So she became Mary Pickford. Am I boring you yet with this, Brad, or are we good?
No, actually, I like that because Mary Pickford is a little more down home and relatable than Marie.
Okay, but here's the problem. So she's on Broadway. You think she'd be doing great. She's on Broadway in a David Belasco play, the family set, but they weren't because theater was seasonal. And in the summer, there was no work. The theaters shut down in the summer because it was too damn hot. There was no air conditioning. So about this same time, down on 14th Street in New York, there was this little thing happening that was soon to be called the movies. And the most successful of these was a company called Biograph. And it was run by a man named David Wark Griffith, who you may have heard of as D.W. Griffith. And against her better judgment, but at the urging of her mother, Mary went down to Biograph. She met with Griffith, and they began working in a very contentious relationship. But she began working for him, and she fell in love with making movies. She only went back to the theater after that one more time. From then on, she was in the movies. And this was in 1909, as I said. So just think about that. Well over 100 years ago, this woman began making films.
And what amazed me about this movie is it's so timeless.
Yeah, it is.
98 years old, and this movie is timeless.
Well, you know why you think that? You know why I think that is? It's because of a lot of things, but the major reason is, and this is what's important about Mary Pickford, is Mary Pickford basically invented screen acting. So I want you to think about this for a minute. So back in the early 1900s, when movies first started, film acting was very much like theater acting of the day. It's called Delsarte method. And what it means is gestures indicate emotions. So if you're angry, you clench your fists, or if you're sad, you wipe your brow, you cock your head. And Griffith wanted Mary to act this way. And this is one of the reasons why they had such a contentious relationship. And she said, that's ridiculous. She says, I'm not a little child. I'm a young woman. I don't do that. I don't go into gesticulation over things. She said that camera, Mary knew that the camera's eye was like 6 feet away from her. So doing these big gestures looked ridiculous. She just knew instinctively that if she really felt something, and if it were true, if she was really feeling it, it would show in her eyes and her face and her body, and the camera would register it, and it would be transmitted to the audience. So, she was fired on more than one occasion from Griffith because she refused to do things like that. And he would hire her back again and would say, okay, do it your way. And then he began to see that she was right. And he gave her more and more to do in bigger and bigger roles. And as I said, she never went back to Broadway except one more time. She never returned to the stage again. And so as she began to be noticed, she began to be called the Biograph girl, the girl with the golden curls. She began to be known, and this never happened before. There was a Biograph girl before Mary, but not with the level of fame of Mary's. And I think I want to say that out because it was what Pickford did. It was this acting style of hers. George Cukor, remember we've talked about George Cukor, the director George Cukor before, right?
Mm-hmm. Once or twice.
Yeah, no slouch as far as directors go. And George Cukor called her the first method actress. Now, she called it mood acting, but what he meant was what he meant was, as I just said, she knew if she really believed it, it would come through her eyes to that camera and out the projector and into the hearts of the audience. And she was right. And more than any other actress, she was loved by her audience. Mm-hmm. They formed an emotional connection with her through her eyes. Her eyes told you everything. And did you find, this is what I love about this movie that we will eventually get to. Her eyes, they tell you so much. Every single emotion that she is feeling is transmitted through those big brown eyes.
I noticed that right from the beginning. I didn't notice that her eyes were brown, but
well, it's a black and white film, but yeah, her eyes were brown.
But no, right from the beginning, I'm like, wow, she has great eyes. Her expressions are great. And, it was sillier than I knew very little about Mary. I knew about Mary Pickford from a historical standpoint, but I knew very little of her acting. Mm-hmm. And I expected more of a romance, haughty type of romance.
Really?
I didn't expect this kind of, it wasn't slapsticky like Laurel Hardy, but I didn't expect this much humor, and there was a little silliness. I wouldn't expect, only because I knew she was such a big star, and it didn't seem like it would have been appropriate for the time.
Well, that's a myth about Mary Pickford. Okay. Another myth about Mary Pickford is that she's cloying. She was always a little girl. She was cloying. It's so wrong. And I think this film, she doesn't play a little girl in this film, obviously. She plays a young woman. But that wasn't Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford was one of the audience. Another reason why they loved her. She was a working class girl. Now, she was a huge star. She was very, very rich by this point. But her image was that of the working class. And that's why she was so popular. she was that the audiences identified with her because they saw her as one of them. And I think that's what you responded to, because Mary Pickford, this persona as a sweet young girl is totally wrong. She was a hellion. She was an energetic, feisty, optimistic, sometimes ornery young woman. And that's what she plays here. She plays a young, ambitious woman who loves her family, but who can be tough if she needs to be. And that's the thing about Mary Pickford I'd like to dispel, is that she's not cloying. People think, it happened because Shirley Temple remade a lot of Mary Pickford's films in sound. And that is Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple is cloying. She is, the little girl. That's not Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford is hell on wheels in many of her films, and she's a hell of a lot of fun, too. So I'm glad that you said that, and I think that's important to point out.
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise.
Good. I'm glad that's a surprise.
Right from the beginning, when she's walking around with a pan on her foot.
Isn't that a great first scene?
I was like, what? I did not expect that.
I love that opening scene. Yes. The opening scene of My Best Girl takes place in the department store. All these department stores in the 1920s, they're just like madness, chaos. Anytime you see a department store from a film in the 1920s, they're chaotic. Everybody's climbing all over everybody, and they're so busy, and everybody's being pulled in all these directions, and she's carrying all these pots. She's a stock girl. And what happens to her? She's carrying these pots, and she keeps dropping them and trying to hold on to them. And then something happens, which I love, which sums up Mary Pickford to a T. Do you remember what happens that's like, ooh, what's going on here? She loses her underwear.
Oh, my God, yes. And that woman thinks it's hers. Oh, my God, I was laughing hysterically.
She's carrying these pots, and she's like, almost made it. And she's like, what? She feels something, and she looks down, and her bloomers start to fall around her ankles. So she steps out of them, and she kicks them over, and she's walking over, and then a customer comes walking and gets tangled up at them and looks down at them and thinks they're hers. So she pulls them up really quickly and backs out of the scene. It's this kind of humor. It's this kind of fun, common man humor that Mary Pickford did. And, a sad thing about one of the reasons why people don't know who Mary Pickford, have these misrepresentations about Mary Pickford, is the fact that, and it's kind of her fault, she took all of her films out of circulation once talkies came in, because she thought people would think they were old-fashioned and they would laugh at them. So she's kind of responsible for this. She actually was going to burn them.
Oh.
Can you imagine? She was going to burn all of her films because she did not want to be laughed at. She thought people are going to think I'm old-fashioned. I don't want to be a caricature. And it was only because her good friend Lillian Gish told her not to do that. And then slowly she allowed them to be seen until they're being seen more and more and more. And after she died, then they've really come out. And people can reevaluate and rediscover Mary Pickford for the true, wonderful actress that she was.
Well, and I think some people could mistake it as being ridiculous. The overexpressions and the makeup.
Yeah.
But I think anybody's smart enough to understand that's actually a skill, those reactions, because it was a silent film. And again, they had to talk through their expressions. And
it was a silent film. But I don't think about Pickford is, and this is why Q-Corps calls her the first method actress. I don't think she's ever over the top.
No. I didn't mean that in that sense. But the exaggerations are more than what we normally see. I would say, especially, what's his name, Buddy?
Buddy Rogers, Charles Buddy Rogers.
Yeah, especially he did, but I don't think it was bad, but he did a lot of very exaggerated emotions.
Well, okay. I mean, I see what you're saying.
Despite being incredibly handsome.
Well, yes, Buddy Rogers. We'll get to Buddy Rogers and his relationship with Mary. But yes, but it's a style. It's a theatrical style. People also don't realize that silent films are a different art form.
Yes.
Talkies did not replace silent films. They are two totally different, I'm going to say it, two different entities. Silent films were different than talkies. And so you have to remember that. That's one of the reasons why talkies had such a difficult time, because people were used to these incredible images of silent film, these lush scores, and these beautiful, glorious, tinted images. And then suddenly the camera's stationary and people don't move and they just talk. And that's why it took so long for sound film to get going, because they had to find their own style.
I equate that to black and white and color films. They're two different art forms. They colorize films, which just drives me nuts because those old films were designed to be filmed in black and white.
Yeah.
So that's why when they colorize it, no matter how good a job they do, it doesn't look right.
No, it doesn't. And we've talked about that too. To me, it's
a different art form.
To me, you're tampering with the director's vision, which I feel the same thing about pan and scan. That's why I will only watch something if it's shot in widescreen. I will only watch it in widescreen because you're missing half the movie when you watch it in standard screen. I don't think that's as much an issue now with widescreen TVs. But
before you go on, I want to give my background on why I had the expectations I did with this movie.
Oh, please do. I want to hear them.
There's two silent films that really come to mind. Are you familiar with Lauren Hardy's The Music Box?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I used to hike around Silver Lake, and for those that don't know, Silver Lake is known for these stairs that were designed so people could get down to the trolley cars.
Right.
And one of those long staircases is called the Music Box Stairs now, because Laurel and Hardy filmed a movie where their job was to get a piano from the bottom of the stairs to the top of the stairs. Mm-hmm. Now, there were very little cards in that film because it was mostly physical slapstick, and it was very funny. It was very cute. Mm-hmm. Then I had the opposite side where I watched, I'm going to use Birth of a Nation as one, where there are a lot of cards that you had to read because there was so much involved in the story. I thought this movie, because of my expectations of Mary, was going to lean more towards the Birth of a Nation side. Not that I didn't think it'd be the same movie, but I thought the style would be the same.
Right.
I'm happy that it was in the middle. Probably lean a little more towards Laurel and Hardy as far as the simplicity of it, but a better film, a better dumb film. And there is slapstick, but it's not a slapsticky movie. There is slapstick in it.
There is slapstick in it.
Whereas Laurel and Hardy was a slapsticky film.
Yes, yes, exactly. There is a great deal of humor in this film. There's also a great deal of romance in this film. And I'm glad you point that out. Now, you also have to remember that this is 1927, the height of the art of silent film, because this film was released in November, and a movie was released 1 month before in October called The Jazz Singer. So this film was truly when silent films were at their peak. You watch almost any film, any celebrated film from 1927, and you're going to have the same reaction. They're glorious. That's the peak of the art form. So that's also, I wanted to give you a film that showed them at their peak because it truly was the zenith of this incredible art form, which, by the way, would be gone completely in a few years. Gone completely.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing. It's crazy to think that an art form was so beloved, was so quickly discarded so fast. It's insane. It's insane. So before we talk about the production of My Best Girl, I just want to say I'm going to wrap up my Mary Pickford session here because to drive the point home about this woman and who basically invented Hollywood, I just want to point out a couple things. The firsts, and I'm not going to give all of them because there's so many, but as we said, Mary Pickford was the first movie star. She set the parameters for movie stardom. Nobody had ever done it before. So Julia Roberts, Annette Bening, who's a movie star today? Meryl Streep, of course.
Yes.
Yes. Mary Pickford was first. They owe that debt to Mary Pickford. No one had ever done it before. The publicity, the rise, the fandom, all Mary Pickford. And also, since she was the first person to experience the rise, she was the first one to experience the fall. So when her career began to decline, she's like, oh, this is what this is. Nobody had ever gone through it before. She was the first actor to receive $1 million in 1 year. And I've said this one before. She was the first woman to run her own Hollywood studio. And the only one until who, Brad?
Lucille Ball.
That's right. Ding, 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 ding. I was like, you know this, don't you, Brad? I say it like every podcast.
Of course I knew it. I just was stunned when you asked me a question out of the blue, but I knew it right away.
Mary Pickford and Lucy. And ironically, I think the only other person in the world whose face has been seen more people is Lucy. So that's kind of interesting that these women have a lot in common, Lucy and Mary Pickford.
Well, they were both great actors and both great business people.
Oh, incredible business people. Adolf Zucker said that Mary Pickford, if she had decided not to become an actress, she could have run U.S. Steel because she knew everything about the business of filmmaking. I said she was the first actress to receive a percentage, 50%, before she owned the films outright. She and Douglas Fairbanks were Hollywood's first movie star couple. So Brad and Angelina and Taylor and Burton, Lucy and Desi, all go back to Pickford and Fairbanks. They were the first ones to live in Beverly Hills at Pickfair, which the press dubbed with their two names, Pickford and Fairbanks, Pickfair.
We have Bradley and
yes. Desilu. Yes, that's where Desilu comes from.
Yeah, this was the first couple melding name, Pickfair.
Exactly.
And I have a question about, before I forget, Pickfair Studios.
Yeah.
Well, I know the studio doesn't exist. Does that property exist still under a different studio name?
Yes.
Okay.
It's on Santa Monica and Formosa.
Okay.
Santa Monica Boulevard in Formosa, I think it's called The Lot.
Oh, okay. I know where yes, I know. I'm familiar with The Lot.
Yes, that was the Pickford Fairbanks studio. So when Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks got married, they brought their studios together and they made all of their films at the Pickford Fairbanks studio. Robin Hood was made there. This film was made there. The Thief of Baghdad was made there. Sparrow is Mary's film. Before this was everything since 1920 was made there. So she was the first major star to enter talkies. So there's another myth blown that, these silent stars didn't want. No, Mary's like, ooh, something new. Let me try it. She was one of the initial investors in the Chinese theater. And there's some legend that the footprints were her idea. I don't know about that, but some people claim that.
I always heard that was a step by accident.
Well, that somebody claimed.
I don't know if I ever believed that, but
people have claimed that her little doggy made footprints in the cement at Pickfair, and that's where they got the idea. But I mean,
that's fun. Let's stick with it.
It's a little apocryphal. She's one of the founding members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She was instrumental in the formation of the first film school in the United States, the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And here's the big one. Okay, she, along with Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, formed United Artists.
Yes, I knew that.
Which is still in existence today. All right? This was the first time a group of artists banded together to take control over their films. And, United Artists was begun as a distribution company, not a production company. People get that confused. She had her own production company. Douglas Fairbanks had his own production company. Chaplin had his own. They needed someone to distribute their films. So they created United Artists, and it's been done time and time again by other movie stars, but it was begun with them. And finally, until we come back to it, she was instrumental in the formation of the Motion Picture Home in Woodland Hills, because many of her silent film colleagues were in very dire straits. And she saw that, and she said, these people, like D.W. Griffith, these people cannot end like this. So she was instrumental in creating the Motion Picture Home. Whew. So that's just a couple things about this incredible woman whose film we're talking about today.
I'm such a history buff. I want to tell folks, when they bought this home in Beverly Hills, it was an 18-acre estate. Go look at pictures of the house somewhere in the 20s, and it still exists today. You can find it on Google.
It's not the same house.
It looks a lot different.
It's not the same house.
Oh, it's not the same house. Okay, it looks similar. I was wondering about that. I thought maybe they just changed it a little bit. No, okay. But
the only thing that's the same is there's a sign, a gate says Pickfair.
Okay.
Pia Zadora. You know who Pia Zadora was?
Yes.
Terrible actress in the 80s.
Yes.
She and her husband bought it and destroyed it.
Okay, so but you can still see where it is. If you Google Pickfair, look at where it is back then. And look what happened to Beverly Hills now. It's
crazy.
Let's just say it's not 18 acres anymore.
It was the only thing up there. It was Douglas Fairbanks' hunting lodge. Okay? In the middle of Beverly Hills. It was his hunting lodge, and he gave it to Mary Pickford as a wedding present when they got married.
You know what's funny is I lived a short time in a mansion in Beverly Hills, I lived a short time in a mansion in Hollywood. I just rented a space in it. I didn't own the mansion for sure.
Oh,
I rented a space in it, and we were always told it was Douglas's secondary home for his hunting. And I'm like, I always thought that was true. I have found nothing to say that's true.
No.
I hope it's true because it's a pretty cool place.
Well, they had a bunch of homes, but Pickfair was the place. Let me tell you, people, they were so big by the time they came together and got married. that they couldn't really go places because they would be mobbed wherever they went. So people had to come to them. So, I mean, kings, dukes, heads of state, Lord Mountbatten, the King of Sweden, Amelia Earhart, they came to Pickfair. Pickfair was the place to go with these two people. So, I mean, all of this was started. It was the first house in Beverly Hills to have a swimming pool. I mean, all these things we take for granted, they're even in the lyrics of the Beverly Hillbillies theme song. Movie stars. Was started by Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. It's crazy.
And I want to give a modern equation to that, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
I saw Oprah Winfrey talking, and she was talking about how people talked about Michael Jordan being so extravagant that he had a house with a bowling alley and how huge it was and absurd it was. And Oprah said, "You don't understand. Michael cannot go to the supermarket.
Right.
Michael cannot go to a movie. He's swamped." And she said, so many of these celebrities have this space because that's their only space. And I was like, wow, that really makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that then. I mean, I don't know if that was the case for, I don't think Doug and Mary were going to grocery stores anyway, but I think
I doubt it very seriously.
Yeah, I doubt that, but it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Brad, I want to stop for a moment and say how excited I am to be back for our second season.
Me too, Tony. And we should tell people that we have many exciting new episodes scheduled for this year.
We should. In fact, you just did. But what you didn't do is tell people that really enjoy the show to tell their friends about us.
And what do you know? You just did that.
See how that works?
Yes. So please tell your friends and rate and review us. And you can even send us a message at goinghollywoodpodcast@gmail.com.
They should do that.
Right? They can even suggest a movie or TV show for us to talk about.
Oh, I like that. It's interactive.
Right?
Well, I think that covered all our bases. Let's get back to the show. So let's give a little bit of background of this film, My Best Girl from 1927, United Artists, 1927. What's really wonderful about this film, what I love about this film is it's a story of two people falling in love on screen and in real life. Because Charles Buddy Rogers, who plays the adorable Joe Grant, was the third husband, eventually, of Mary Pickford. And we will get into that. She was married to Douglas Fairbanks when they were making this film. But Rogers freely admitted to falling in love with her during the filming of this film. And I've got to tell you, you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you agree?
Yes, you can definitely see the chemistry between the two. I want to step back a little bit and talk about Charles Rogers.
Oh, please do.
This man, this is the second year after his first filming credit. His first credit is in 1926.
Mm-hmm.
In 1927, he starred in this movie and in Wings.
Right.
A not too shabby film.
No, not at all.
So he just went out like a rocket.
He did.
And I don't know about the rest of his career. I know he went until the 1940s as a regular. He showed up on Petticoat Junction and the Lucy Show in the 60s playing himself.
Yes, he did. Playing himself.
So, but you probably know more about his career after the talkie started.
Yeah, Buddy Rogers was a really wonderful guy. I say that like I knew him. I knew all these people in a previous life.
You were chums.
Yeah, Buddy Pickford, I almost said. Buddy Rogers, his moniker was America's boyfriend. So you had America's sweetheart with America's boyfriend. And you're absolutely right. Buddy Rogers had quite a year in 1927. Just started films. Second year in, Wings, which was the first film to win the Best Picture Academy Award, and personally picked by Mary Pickford to be her co-star in My Best Girl. Now, can you imagine? You're just starting your acting career, and the biggest star in the world personally picks you to be her co-star. I mean, good Lord, that's crazy, right? But it happened. It happened. And yes, their chemistry, this is what's amazing. This is a film which is 98 years old. This film is almost 100 years old. And you can see the chemistry between these two people. The way it jumps off a 100-year-old film. And I love that about this. I fall in love with them falling in love with each other when I watch this because it's so romantic. It's so sweet. And I think that's one of the most wonderful things about viewing this film is you have the knowledge, too, that these people really did end up together. Now, they ended up together 10 years later, but still, this was the beginning of it. And it's such a sweet, sweet thing.
Yeah, it's not the typical forced rich boy falls in love with average girl. I wouldn't say she's poor, but average girl. It is chemistry from the beginning. It's like, boom, they belong together.
It is. It is. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the plot of My Best Girl? And don't feel like you have to go, not plot point by plot point, but just tell us, give people an idea.
So what this movie is Charles Rogers plays Joe Grant, whose real name is Joe Merrill. Merrill is a 5 and dime chain. You presume it's a large chain because his father is very wealthy. And he is engaged to this woman named Millicent. And he is working in a Merrill department store as Joe Grant because his father wants him to prove that he can work his way up in a store without the family name, basically to show he can work. So he is undercover, and Mary Pickford works in the stockroom, a stock girl, as they say.
Right.
And that is where they put Joe in the stockroom, and she trains him. And during training, they start liking each other just a little bit.
Exactly.
Now, remember, he is still engaged to Millicent.
Right.
During this whole time, though she quickly vanishes for a while. Well, you just get to watch these scenes of her toying with him.
Right.
Yes. She toys with him.
Well, she's a jazz baby. She's the jazz baby, which plays in later when Mary Pickford plays Maggie Johnson, who, yes, is a stock girl at Merrill's department store, one of these great 20s department stores, which I would love to go back to experience because they always were chaos. And she's training Joe. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know he's the boss's son. She thinks he's just some poor schnook that doesn't know how to do anything. He's really kind of incompetent, but boy, is he cute. Boy, is he adorable with those big brown eyes.
He is adorable. Now, Joe and his family live in this large mansion, beautiful place. Mm-hmm. They go to this club that is gorgeous Art Deco style. Mary lives in a traditional home. Her father I think he's a postman. He could be a engineer. Is he a postman?
Yeah, a postman, but he doesn't do anything.
No, he doesn't.
They're all ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, they pretty much are all, especially her floozy sister Liz, who I just love.
Yes, Liz is great. Well,
Liz is the opposite of her mother, who I loved as well, played by Sunshine Hart.
God bless Sunshine Hart. What does Maggie's mother do with her days, Brad? Do you remember that?
Maggie's mother has a hobby.
Yes.
Maggie's mother loves to go to funerals. She doesn't know. She comes home from a funeral. She's talking about how lovely it was and how much she cried. And the father says, "Who died?" And she said, "I don't remember their name, but it was beautiful."
It's cathartic for her.
It's the most beautiful one I attended this week.
Yes, it's cathartic for her. Here's the thing. Here's the really interesting thing about My Best Girl and for Mary Pickford's final silent film, okay, the summation of her entire silent career, her final silent film, it's got some autobiographical digs. And that the family, the entire Johnson family, is kind of like a little dig to Mary Pickford's real family. Because Mary Pickford was always taking care of everybody. From the time she first got that role on stage, and she said this many times in her life, she became the father of the family. And in fact, Pa Johnson says near the end of the movie, "It's time I became the father of the family." Mm-hmm. So there's that line in there. And just like with her sister Liz, Mary was always taking care of her younger sister Lottie and her younger brother Jack because they were always getting in trouble. She was always, it wasn't necessarily jail, but she was always paying money to squash some story that was going to be in the press, or she was always coming to their rescue. So Maggie is very, very much like Mary Pickford was in real life. It's a really interesting kind of autobiographical slant. Obviously, Mary Pickford was not living in this shanty near the highway in the middle of all this huge city. But yeah, I always thought that was very interesting that this definitely has biographical allusions to it.
And just to set up a little bit more, the story begins. It is in this very busy department store. The 5 and Dime, but it looks like today what we would consider a normal department store today.
Right.
And she is a stalker, but the store is very busy at the counters. We see this, and actually, I gotta say, the opening is where I really knew I was in for a good ride. And she comes up with the stock, which is the pots and pans that we mentioned, and she's told to run the counter. Where I knew this was going to go somewhere good is the cute, funny little things with the customers.
Yeah.
We had the husband and the very large wife and the little husband next to her, the peanut of a man next to her, and she's shopping for rolling pins. He holds up a small one, and she holds up a big one, like, no, I'm going to buy this one. And you see the fear in his eyes. So there's that stereotype. Then there's the woman that suggests a toothbrush to this man, and he smiles and he's toothless and says, not for me. And they were just, I was like, this is so cute. Now, the one that really surprised me, it wasn't really humorous, was the black woman that was dressed really nicely in this department store. She was shopping for something nice. And I'm like, is this 1927? I was so happy to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how often that happened. I didn't expect it. In fact, Maurice and his mom were like, what?
Well, Pickford employed many black actors and actresses. I mean, this woman, she truly, I mean, what an incredible woman she was. But no, I love that scene. That first scene, I want to say that this film was shot by Charles Rocher, who was Pickford's favorite cinematographer, and he was the winner of the first Academy Award for cinematography, not for this movie. And it's so beautiful. This film from beginning to end is just lovely, gorgeous to look at. And I think, that lends a big reason to why we find it so romantic. It's so romantically shot. Silent films were often tinted. I don't know if you noticed that, Brad, when you were watching this, but if a scene was to take place outside, it was usually tinted blue. If there was going to be some trouble somewhere, the scene was tinted red. Mm-hmm. So again, another way that the filmmakers communicated with the audience, the mood of a scene. So they didn't need dialogue because they would do these types of things. And this film is so beautiful. In the cinematography. I think that's great. And I love that first scene because it shows you it's this boom economy, these department stores. And that is what you call a star entrance. Your star coming in, carrying these pans and then losing her underwear is a star entrance. Yeah. And I love that. And
it set the tone like within seconds.
It did. And so what happens is that Mary begins training Joe and they begin to fall in love. And there are two scenes in this movie that I just adore. And the first one is the love scene in the packing crate. Do you remember that scene?
Yes, I most definitely remember. I like the scene when she's on the truck first, but we'll get to that if we talk about the packing.
Well, you talk about the truck scene. I think that's a lovely scene.
So the scene is Maggie is leaving work and she gets a ride on the truck. So she's sitting on the back of this, not a tow truck, a moving van.
Yeah.
Open moving van. And he is standing outside the entrance and he's talking to some women and she wants his attention. So as they're driving away, she knocks, I believe it was her purse,
yes,
off the truck. And she's riding away. It was awfully trusting of her to assume that he was going to see this, but he saw it happen. He grabs it and he's chasing after the truck. And I love this because it's not one of these old, where they're rolling and you can see the set is scrolling
right. They were in a real street. Yeah.
This was a real street, a real busy street.
In downtown LA. Yeah.
Yes. And he's chasing after her. In fact, I could see some of the landmarks that I know existed from that time from studying LA. Mm-hmm. He's chasing after her. He catches up. He hands her the purse and he backs up and they wave away. And then she knocks something else off the truck. And again, he has to, and I think that happened 3 times.
Yeah, because she wants him to catch up with her and finally climb in the damn truck with her, which he does.
So finally, he jumps in the truck with her, and they go over what must have been the most bumpy road in Los Angeles because they're being tossed and turned. And he's like, "Let's go somewhere comfortable." And it's so sweet. He puts her on, I don't know, it's like a burlap bag or something. I can't remember exactly. And he takes this ring off a barrel and puts it on her head. It looked like he had nails, so I was a bit nervous for her at that time.
Yeah.
He puts on her head like a queen, and she crowns him with a broom. It is so adorable.
It really is. It's a sweet
and they're
scene.
just doing this little play game, and it's just, that was when I'm like, this is really going where I want it to go.
On the back of a moving truck.
Yes.
That's what's so funny
Yes.
is they're on the back of a moving truck and they're having this adorable little place.
And she has no clue that he's this rich kid.
I love that scene. But to me, I love this. The next love scene is the scene in the packing crate. And it's so beautifully shot. And it was during the filming of this scene that cinematographer Charles Rocher said he first noticed something other than collegiality between the two of them because he couldn't get them to come out of the crate.
I'm amazed they didn't close the crate.
I mean, so yeah, and you can see that when you're watching the movie. You're like, she was a brilliant, brilliant actress, but some things aren't acting. And you can see that in her eyes. And it's so beautifully shot because we start on a really tight shot of the two of them, and we're not really sure where that we are. And then the camera pulls back to reveal that they're in a packing crate in a warehouse.
Well, not before he says this cafe is better than the Ritz.
Exactly. So we think, oh, they're in some romantic cafe. And they're in a packing crate in the middle of a warehouse, but they've created this own little romantic picnic area. And what's so wonderful about that is that they're in their own world. They're oblivious to the world around them. And I think, the way they look at each other and then they have that kiss. And that kiss is so real. And can I tell you, as an actor, actors kind of do that. If you're really attracted to somebody, you might hold the kiss a little bit longer than the character should because you're human and, you have emotion. And that's so obvious there. So the fact that Charles Rocher couldn't get them out of the packing crate is indicative of what was happening in their real lives. The second scene I want to talk about that I love, and it's kind of a famous scene, is the walk in the rain. What did you think of that scene? Do you know which scene I'm talking about when they're walking back and it's pouring rain and they're walking through the city and it's nighttime and they're walking down the street? Remember that scene?
And I'm wondering if this movie was the one that set the stage for love stories to always be in a rainy day.
Well, back then, and Gene Kelly has said this, when it rains in movies, it pours because it has to for the camera to pick up the rain. So, he talks about how he was drenched after Singing in the Rain because they had to do it so many times. And because they so that rain was falling. But what's amazing about that scene, and that scene's often used whenever anybody wants to talk about romance in silent films, they always show that scene because it's a stunningly choreographed scene because these two, again, are truly in their own world. They're walking across a very busy street in the pouring rain, and they are narrowly missing getting hit by buses and bicycles. It's a stunning scene. You're like, how did they let Mary Pickford do this? She's almost hit. But just in the nick of time, he pulls her back, and they're totally oblivious to it.
That's what I was thinking. They would never do that today. They would make sure there was a stunt double.
Oh, absolutely. One false move, and an entire industry would have been out of work.
Oh, yeah. I know. Think of that.
That's kind of crazy, right? It's nuts. It's a beautifully tinted scene. It's tinted blue.
Yes. To
indicate the time of day. It's such a romantic, wonderful, wonderful scene.
It really is.
So anyway, I really love, those are my two favorite scenes. The crate and that walk in the rain, I think are wonderful. What are some of your favorite scenes, Brad?
The other scene that I really enjoyed because it was so cute was when he took Maggie to his home, or I can't remember. I think it's his home, but his parents' home, to the mansion. And he said, the company's slogan is everyone at Merrill's is family or something of that nature. And he said, let's see if that's true and go to their home for lunch or for dinner.
Yeah.
And she's like, what?
Yeah.
And she's game at first because, it's silly play. But when they get there, she's very timid. She's like, wait a minute, this is really their home.
Yeah, yeah.
So he rings the doorbell and the butler comes in and he says, hi, we're employees at Merrill's and we want to know if we can eat dinner here. And he gives the butler a wink a couple of times and the butler figures out he's playing a game. And they go in there and finally she's like, okay, I'm buying into this. This is fun. Because the butler she says, is it really true that Merrill employees can just come here for dinner anytime? And the butler says, he looks at Joe and says, yes, in fact, one is here almost every day. So that's when she goes with it, And she said, let's pretend that we're Mr. and Mrs. Merrill and we live here. And she goes up and she comes strolling down the stairs and talks about she made dinner for him. It's just so sweet because she doesn't have a clue that she is in his home and she's pretending that they are a couple in this home. It shows his fun-loving spirit, despite his hoity-toity parents.
Yeah, they're playing,
especially his mother.
They're playing house, basically. They're playing house.
It's so fun, and I was waiting for something to go wrong.
She's talking about the things she's going to cook them for dinner, and it's just a wonderful romantic scene, even though, he's supposed to be on a date with his fiance and his parents.
Yes.
So you kind of have to overlook the fact that Joe's a little bit of a son of a bitch with his fiance, that he's standing her up for this date with Maggie in the house. And then, of course, what happens? The parents come home with the fiance.
And let me say that you just brought one of the two things that bothered me in the movie, and they're two very minor things. So, I've got to find something. I was very disappointed about this part. I first thought, okay, Millicent's going to be a royal bitch, which I kind of didn't want, but at least it would have sat better. The other one was I wanted somehow for her and Joe, both Millicent and Joe, to realize they were kind of being paired together because of the wealth of their families, and they really just weren't made for each other. I wanted it to work out okay for Millicent. Mm-hmm. Instead, Millicent's just like, hit the road, honey.
Well, it's a heartbreaking scene, and you know what breaks my heart is Pickford in that scene. When she finds out the truth that not only is Joe not Joe Grant, but Joe Merrill, the son of her boss of Merrill's department store, and he's engaged.
And what she tries to do to sacrifice her history with him for his benefit.
It's heartbreaking. It's
now,
again
I couldn't
a primer.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know it's a primer in brilliant film acting. Just to watch Mary Pickford's face and the emotions that come over it. The sudden like, what? Wait, you're who? And then to find out he's engaged. I mean, you've been stringing me on this whole time. What a creep, But she doesn't overdo it.
No,
you get her heartbreak, and your heart breaks for her as she runs away in the rain. It's a heartbreaking scene. It's a heartbreaking scene, and you really hate him for a minute. You really hate Joe for taking Maggie on this ride.
You do, and I think she handled it well. I mean, she could have just slapped his face and said, "You cad," and stormed out. And I think the way they handled it with her pretending she was a gold digging hussy.
So what happens is that Joe is in love with Maggie, and he tells his father, he tells his fiance, I'm in love with this woman. This is the way it is. So Maggie's at home, and Joe's father, Mr. Merrill, Robert Merrill, comes and he tries to buy her off. He tries to buy Maggie off, and he offers her $10,000 to leave his son alone. Now, just for context, $10,000 today is like equivalent. $10,000 then is the equivalent of $182,000 today. So he's offering her $182,000 to leave his son alone. And what do you remember? What happens when he offers her the money, Brad?
Yes, she is initially somewhat timid, but she accepts it. But it's not. She doesn't accept it because she's greedy. She accepts it because she has a family to take care of.
She's heartbroken. She's heartbroken. So she puts on this whole big facade when Joe shows up that she actually took him in. That she's been playing him all along. She's trying to give up. She's saying, I'm going to live a jazz life. She says, a jazz life. And she puts on this record. And the record she puts on is called Red Hot Mama. And so she pretends to be this jazz baby. She smears her lipstick on, and she takes a cigarette out, but she can't quite figure out how to smoke the cigarette.
And so she starts convincing.
No, she starts dancing and mock laughing at Joe. It's very extreme and silly. But you know what? It's heartbreaking at the same time. But Joe is not buying any of this. He knows it's not true. And Joe's father is still there. And Mary won't take his text. She just wants Joe to move on with his life so she can move on with her life. And when eventually, though, she keeps trying to do this, and eventually she just can't go on anymore because she looks at Joe and she sees the love in his eyes, and she just breaks down. And oh, she's so sweet. She breaks down and she says, I'm not a bad girl, Joe. I didn't mean a word I said, and it's so sweet. And they come together, and that's when the father takes the check back. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
He takes the check back. So he's like, well, give me the check back if you're going to be together. But he gives them his blessing, the blessing to be together. And so at the end, they end up together. But now here's what is interesting. Here's what confuses me about this movie.
Okay, I want to hear it.
So they're together, and Joe's going on a boat trip, and the ship is about to leave, so they have to quick pack up Maggie's things to go away with Joe on this boat. Except one thing they forgot: they're not married. So they're in this car and they're racing to get to the boat, and this is a very, very primitive process shot, racing to get to the boat, which is it was a new technique at the time, and it's obviously they hadn't worked out all the kinks, but people believed it at the time. So they get to the boat, and we're like saying goodbye to them at the boat. And again, you're thinking, but wait a minute, you two aren't married. I guess we're assuming that the ship's captain will marry them, because if you notice, the last musical notes of the film are the wedding march. As the film fades out, it goes, da, da, da. So you're like, okay, it's implied they're going to get married on the ship. The ship's captain will marry them. And that's the end of the movie. They sail off to be together and married by the captain and live happily ever after. And that is my best girl.
I think the captain marrying them was just an automatic thought process for me. It's where my brain went. But the one thing that I thought was funny and askew in this was that they got to her house, and they have the whole issue with the family and the father finally taking charge and telling Liz he's going to straighten things up, and he spanks her, as a matter of fact. And then he tells mother she's no longer going to go to funerals. He's like, I'm the father. I'm going to be the man now.
Yeah, I'm going to be the father of the family, is what he says. So when Pa Johnson, who's played by Lucien Littlefield, Pa Johnson finally grows some cojones here and takes charge, it's because Maggie says, and this is the title card, I can't marry you, Joe. My family needs me more than you do. And that is when Pa Johnson stands up and says, like hell we do. And that was a title card. Did that shock you?
Not at first. I read it and started going on with the movie, and I said, wait a minute. And I actually rewound it. I'm like, wow. In that year, they said profanity.
It's crazy, right? This was 1927, and the official Hays Code had not been written yet, but there was still regulation. But I got to tell you, that still took me back. Profanity in a Mary Pickford film on a title card. It's like, take that, Shirley Temple. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I know. And also crazy when they decide that Joe and Maggie are going to catch this ship to, what was that? I think Hawaii.
Yeah.
They say we have 10 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
So they have 10 minutes. And in that time, she goes into her bedroom. She changes her clothes, and she then packs her bags. They then get in the car. They then drive to the ship. They must be awfully close to the dock.
Well, they didn't live in the best neighborhood, so probably.
Well, it didn't seem that bad. Yeah. And now I'm going to bring up the one thing I'm going to give negative about this film. And it has to do with Pa Johnson, so I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah. Lucien Littlefield.
Yes. I don't know his acting history. I meant to look it up before we started. I thought he was the only bad actor. The whole time I'm watching him, well, when Joe first came on the scene, because a little exaggerated, especially because of the makeup was so heavy, it took me out for a second. But I accepted it quickly because of the time era, and I got right back into the film. But every time Pa was on, I'm like, that man is acting. So, an example, I've been watching Matlock with the Family with Kathy Bates. And there is a character on this show, I can't stand her. When I'm watching her, I'm watching somebody acting. There's the same thing with this father. The whole time I'm like, he's terrible. He's terrible. Now, maybe others may disagree, but I wasn't fond of him.
Well, I think it's a style. He had a very long career, Lucien Littlefield, by the way. I mean, he was a very popular character actor, and he worked. I mean, he worked until the 50s. I think he was in television. And that's the character comedy too. He's painted very broadly, but I get what you're saying. I get it. It's just a bit like, it's like some of the other conceits in this movie. It's theatrical. That style again. He's a bit of a caricature. You just kind of have to say, okay, I mean, not everybody is as real as Pickford was. There's still a little bit of that leftover, air quote, silent film acting that Pickford kind of blew away. So I get what you're saying. It's, The Mother is also very funny and very broad, too.
I thought The Mother was good. And actually, I thought everybody else was really good. I just really like The Mother. I think
they're all good.
I will say I can complain about Lucien, but he has 294 acting credits. So obviously, some like him.
Yeah. Well, I think he was around since 1914, so he was around almost as long as Pickford. Do you want to now talk about, I know, this movie is from 1927, so, record keeping, not necessarily the most accurate, but do you have numbers on this film?
I do, and that was something I was a little concerned about, because I had to search, and the numbers were a little suspect to me, and I wasn't expecting anything to be like they are today, where I won't say to the penny, but they have a pretty good idea of how much these movies cost and how much they made. So the numbers that I can find in this movie was it cost $480,000. And it made about $1 million, or a little over $1 million. Mm-hmm. So not shabby. As I said, the $1 million is equal to about $19 million today. Mm-hmm. It was directed by Sam Taylor, and he started directing in 1924. So this is only his third year of directing. And what a great film for that time. And he was active up until the 1940s.
He was. Look at you with your Sam Taylor trivia.
Yeah, he did some great writing. He actually did. Well, he wrote some things after the 40s, but only one or two things.
Yeah. There's a very funny, famous story about Sam Taylor in writing. And, but I'm going to tell you, because you know what? You brought him up. I was going to skip it, but you brought up Sam Taylor. So, yes, Sam Taylor was a very accomplished comedy director and writer. He worked a lot with Harold Lloyd, and he worked a lot with Pickford during this time. He directed this film. He directed her next film, Coquette, and he directed her second film, her second talkie after Coquette, which was a version of The Taming of the Shrew, which she made with her husband, Douglas Fairbanks. And there's a very famous story about one of the first screenings of the film, because Sam Taylor was not only the director of it, he also contributed to the screenplay, like directors do. And allegedly, the opening title card went up and said, The Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare, with additional dialogue by Sam Taylor. Now, that might be apocryphal, but that's just one of those funny stories about Hollywood. Oh, Hollywood.
But that actually may be fair to Will.
Yeah?
If Sam threw some words in there that Shakespeare didn't write.
Well, I think it's with additional dialogue by Sam Taylor after the William Shakespeare. So anyway, My Best Girl was a hit. As I said, it was Pickford's last silent film because, as I said before, The Jazz Singer was released the month before My Best Girl and changed everything. So Pickford, unlike some of these other people, Pickford was not afraid of talkies at all. I mean, she started on stage, so she knew she could talk. So she was one of the very first major stars to jump into talkies with Coquette in 1929, and she won the Oscar for Best Actress, the second Oscar for Best Actress that was given. And also, Coquette was her biggest moneymaker ever, which was not unusual with silent stars because audiences, as you can imagine, were very curious about what they sounded like. So their first talkies were almost always huge hits. Mm-hmm. It was the second one that was the real test. And her second one, The Taming of the Shrew, as I said, it was a bit of a disappointment. It's actually a good film. It's not a bad film. It's just, it's an early talkie. And audiences were used to these lush, beautiful, moving films with a camera swooping all over the place and, walking in the rain. And suddenly it's all one shot. The camera doesn't move. It's static. dialogue, static. And so it's very stiff. And Pickford, despite her genius at film acting, did have some trouble with Coquette. She won the Oscar, but that was really for her career achievement, I think, that she won it, you know. And after that, she just kind of seemed to lose energy. She made a few more films, like a couple of which I really like. She did a fun film called Kiki, which I think is a lot of fun. And her last film was a picture called Secrets in 1933, which was also a very good film. But she just seemed to be winding down, you know. But I mean, give her a break. She'd been making films since 1909, and she was getting older, and there was a whole generation of younger actresses coming up behind her, nipping at her heels. But, you know, I think more than that, Mary Pickford, more than any other star probably, was emblematic of the silent film era.
I want to jump in, though. It sounds like this transition was very similar to when somebody transitions from stage to screen or the other way around.
Well, you have to learn a different style of acting. Yeah. So these people who had been acting with their faces and acting with their eyes, you know, as Pickford, they either had to return to using their voices or they had to learn how to do it completely. Now, Pickford had been on stage, so she knew. She just had to remind herself. But I mean, she had been making silent films for over 20 years. So she was a little bit rusty. She's still good in Coquette. Don't get me wrong. It's just the technology of the time and the fact that it is very static. So it's kind of difficult to sit through now. Mm-hmm. But you know, also at this time, she had a lot of personal things happen to her. She right after My Best Girl, her mother, who was her rock, Charlotte, was with her entire life. She was diagnosed with cancer and she died. And then her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks was unraveling. And then I guess most tragic of all is she fell prey to an old family disease, which also her father and her sister and her brother fell prey to, and that's alcoholism. And she unfortunately spent many of the last years of her life holed up in a room at Pickfair, drinking and isolating.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's so sad because this woman invented Hollywood. I mean, mm-hmm. There's a book called The Woman Who Invented Hollywood. I mean, right? She did, and she did end up incredibly rich because I think she owned half of Beverly Hills, but it's still kind of sad, you know. But before all that sadness, in 1936, after her marriage to Fairbanks ended, which was very, very difficult for her, But who was there for her? Her good friend, Buddy Rogers. And they reconnected and they got married and they adopted 2 children. And Buddy Rogers eventually gave up his film career and he had a very successful career as a band leader and a musician for the rest of his life. But you know, here's something interesting. It's so like a lot of other silent film icons, when it came time to cast the role of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder offered her the part. And she's like, yeah, thanks a lot, Billy. No thanks.
Too real.
She had no desire to do that. I mean, and she didn't need to. You know, as I said, she owned half of Beverly Hills. She still had a hand in United Artists, and she was the last of the original 4 founders to sell her shares in UA in 1956. And then she had her philanthropy, as I said, the Motion Picture Home. She did a lot of charity, and she did radio occasionally, but she just kind of faded into the background to the point where nobody would really ever see her. And, you know, there's stories about near the end of her life, about people coming to pay her a visit at Pickfair, and they wouldn't see her. Buddy would come in and bring a tape recorder from upstairs and put it on the table and play a personal greeting from Mary to her guests.
Oh, wow.
You know, because she just didn't want to leave her room. She was just in that alcohol haze. So her last, air quotes, public appearance was in 1976. She received an honorary Oscar, and it wasn't really a public appearance because the Oscars actually went to Pickfair. The mountain went to Mohammed. She didn't leave Pickfair. You know, and it's on YouTube. It's very sad because she looks like, well, she's propped up in this chair and she's like a Muppet, you know. It's just sad. And you think, God, this woman who created this entire industry. And it was just sad. It's a sad ending.
Have they made a movie about this? Because this is a really sad rise and fall story.
Well, they kind of made a film called Sunset Boulevard, but
yeah.
I mean, not really the Mary Pickford story. But still. It's still sad, though. It's still sad. This woman who had such energy and was so vital and as I said, created this entire industry, ends up kind of alone in a room drinking. But anyway, she died on May 29th, 1979. And Buddy Rogers remarried. And when Buddy Rogers died, his widow got Mary's Oscar for Coquette because she inherited his things, And this happened a lot, The second spouse always gets the first spouse's things. Mm-hmm. So that's why today, if you win an Oscar, you have to sign a release before they give it to you that says, when you die, it goes back to the Academy,
Because people were auctioning them off. I've heard those stories.
Yeah. But there's one wonderful thing about Buddy Rogers is that Buddy Rogers, as I said, was always there for her. He was her rock through those last very difficult final years. And to the end of his life, whenever anyone would ask him about Mary, Buddy was always very effusive about Mary. He was always very complimentary and very loving in his comments. And he would always say at the end of the conversation, and you know what? She's still my best girl. Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful. It's very sweet.
It is. Well, Brad, wow. That was my best girl. We talked a lot for a silent movie.
Yeah, and I could go on and on about the rest of the cast, but I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have. We covered a lot. I can't tell you how much it means to me talking about this film for my birthday. It's the best birthday present I could get. To talk about this film and talk about this woman that I just adore. And I really urge people, go watch a Mary Pickford film. Watch My Best Girl. Watch some of her later silents. You will be stunned by them and by this woman. She was a true original and genius.
You're right. And it is in public domain, so you can go. It's all over on YouTube. Go watch it, guilt-free. But I want to give a warning on which ones you pick, because there are a lot of them that have no music. It's just silent. And I watched this film 3 times, and the second time I was going to watch it, I picked up one of the other channels than what I did originally, and it was silent, and it was very difficult. And I ended up having to turn it off and go back to a different channel where they had the music again.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference. Make sure you have the music.
Yeah, absolutely. Silent films were never silent.
Exactly.
Don't do that to yourself, people. Yes. And if you get the opportunity to see it in the theater, I mean, that's the first time I saw it was in the theater. My God, that's just amazing.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, it's even better.
It's your birthday, but I want to thank you for the gift, because now I want to go watch some more Mary Pickford films, and I never had a desire before.
Well, I'll send you some links.
Please do.
Okay.
Good.
Well, Brad, I guess in that case, there's only one thing left to say, but I don't want to say it. So let's not say goodbye. Let's just say...
If we were on video, you would see Tony holding up a title card that says au revoir. And to that I say, no, let's just say goodbye.
That's all, folks.